Okay, so the purpose of this video is to give you an overview of what I'm calling the Great Western Road Trip. This is my third road trip in a row across the West, and I'll provide you a little bit of an overview of what I did. So I went from July the 14th through August the 14th, so exactly 1 month. Rolled back into Dallas on the 14th, and just absolutely exhausted and happy at the same time. As a matter of fact, I was joking. I could have come and taken a 2 hour nap and then gone right back out on the road and done it again. So much fun. So it was approximately 3,400 miles total. I think it was actually probably more than that. I didn't do time it, or I didn't do the mileage exactly. Approximately 34, probably 3,800 miles, something like that. Major stops. So I did Montana and Idaho primarily, and then caught a little bit of Utah on the way back. Um, Went to Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, which is near Lima, Montana. Um, I'm actually a little confused as to whether it's a refuge or a preserve. I think I call it both in here. I believe it's a wildlife preserve, actually. Anyways, Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, a wonderful place. Upper Rock Creek, went back there again, which is near Phillipsburg, Montana. Went to the Bitterroot Valley for a little bit, Sun Valley, Idaho for a week, and then with the family to Yellowstone. And again, on the way back, I caught Moab, Utah, which is just a magical place. Um, and in terms of who accompanied me on the trip, Eric Block, my buddy, who is a teacher at the Durham School and a coach at the Durham School in Durham, North Carolina, met me up there. Wilson Yeagley met me in Sun Valley. He's my neighbor across the street, wonderful guy and fly fisherman. Came and spent a week with me in Sun Valley. And then my family came and met me, Christy, my dear wife, Hank's wife, Cameron, my son, Cameron, and Kate. Unfortunately, Ben could not come on this trip because he had, actually after I left, he left for his adventure. He's now teaching English in Japan. So very proud of you, Ben. Okay, so day one, I went from Dallas to Hays, Kansas, just like I did last year. This is a 9 hour trip. What I was trying to do is to avoid normal routes. So no Highway 287, no Amarillo, no New Mexico, no driving through Denver, etc. And I also didn't go north on I-35 up through Oklahoma City and Wichita, Kansas, Salina, Kansas, etc. I decided I wanted to do something a little off the beaten path, and I did the coolest. I love this route. I actually went to Wichita Falls, which did take some driving on 287, but that from there, and actually from Vernon, Texas, you go north up through Altus, Oklahoma. Altus is a good name. It actually, there are mountains there. It's just kind of miraculous to me. I don't know what geological event caused Altus, Oklahoma to have mountains, but there are legitimate mountains there. Kind of surprising. Then I just headed straight north and went through Woodward, Kansas, encountered a huge storm there, hail, wind, heavy rain, had to pull over and hide my car, trying not to get hail damage. Ended up not getting hail damage, but it was very exciting. Beautiful rainbow. And I just drove straight north up to Hays, Kansas. I do want to point out that once again this year I used an application called Autio, Autio. Highly, highly recommend this application because it connects with the GPS on your iPhone. It knows where you are if you allow it, and it'll tell stories the whole way. And I just learned the most fascinating things about, for instance, there's a town in southern Kansas or northern Nebraska, northern Kansas or southern Nebraska. I can't remember which, that had a massive tornado a few years back, F5 tornado that came through and literally wiped the town from the map. And they rebuilt it as a green city, if you will, with federal government help. And it's really cool. They've got solar panels, and it's supposed to be all of the energy that the town uses comes from solar, maybe wind, but I think just solar. And it was kind of a cool experimental thing that those guys built from the ground up and did that. I thought was kind of neat. Anyways, ended up in Hays, Kansas. Hays is a neat little college town. Fort Hays State University is there. Just a neat little college town. Also a prison town, which makes it a little less neat, but I didn't see the prison, nor any of the prisoners, thank goodness. Stayed at the Bissing House, which I got on Airbnb. If you see the upstairs room, the second floor room to the left there, that's the room I stayed in. Highly recommend it. It was a really, really cool place to stay. No different in price from a Best Western or a Holiday Inn. And got breakfast with it the next morning. Had breakfast with a nice couple from Kansas who were going to visit their family in Breckenridge. All right. So, one other thing I'll point out, this drive didn't take me a whole lot longer than if I'd gone straight up 35 to Salina and across. I think it ended up taking me 30 minutes longer, maybe half an hour. It was not much longer at all, and well worth it. So highly recommend that route. Vernon, Dallas to Vernon, and north from there. I don't know the road, but through Altus, Oklahoma, through Woodward, Oklahoma, through Kansas, all the way up to Hays, Kansas. Day 2, Hays, Kansas to Rawlins, Wyoming. So this is a route I've taken before. Went from Hays north to, I believe it was the town of North Platte, on the Platte River. And then from there, I took interstate. I try as much as I can to avoid interstate. I had to use the interstate a few times on the trip. I don't like it. I don't like the trucks. I don't like the fact that you're not seeing the local stuff. And I don't like the fact that, it feels like everybody's, really in a hurry on the interstate. Excuse me. But it was fun. One of the things I'll point out on this drive is I mentioned in last year's video I drove through Pine Bluffs, drove through it again, and drove right through the town of Pine Bluffs, Wyoming, which is just over the border. I don't know if the pointer here is working on the video, but right there by Cheyenne, probably an hour from Cheyenne, you've got this town of Pine Bluffs. It comes out of nowhere. And it's really a cool site. Go to the rest area there. If you can, take the walk over to the archaeological dig that the University of Wyoming is doing. Highly recommend. So ended up in Rawlins, Wyoming. Not a particularly sexy town, but it's kind of cool. I mentioned before, I think John McPhee in his book, one of his books, Rising from the Plains, actually mentions Rawlins as a place that his mother got off in as a teacher from Wellesley College and was in for quite the cultural shock when she got there. Anyways, good read. From Rawlins, I went up to Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, where I needed to meet my buddy Eric. I actually met him at the Flat Ranch Nature Preserve or something like that on Henry's Fork. Beautiful, beautiful place. They have volunteers at the little house there that really want to talk to you about the area. It's a neat place. So we met up there and then drove the road right past south of Henry's Lake, immediately south of Henry's Lake. It's a dirt road, gravel road that takes you up and over into Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. And so here's the map of that entire drive. I was talking to Dad the previous day, and we were talking about routes, and he said, where are you headed? And I said, well, I'm going to continue on the interstate over to Rock Springs and then head up to Pinedale. And he said, I have a different idea for you. Why don't you head north directly out of Rawlins there on Highway 287, which is kind of ironic since I was trying to avoid Highway 287, ended up driving it anyways, but this is a totally different part of 287. And Dad told me that that 287 actually runs from Galveston, Texas, all the way to Glacier National Park. And pointed out that it would be a really fun trip, interesting trip sometime, basically to stay on 287 all the way from Galveston to Glacier. And just rather than avoiding 287, driving that thing the whole way, I think it'd be a fascinating trip. But this was just a fantastic, incredibly jaw-droppingly beautiful drive. And I call it Chief Washakie country because from Rawlins all the way up through the Wind River Reservation it's the Chief Washakie Highway is what it's called. It was also called the Lander Cutoff back in the day. And it was a cutoff that the federal government created. It was actually the federal government's first involvement in the trails west, whether the Overland Trail, the Old Cheyenne Trail, or whether the Oregon or the California Trail, et cetera. They actually came through Washakie's land and built this thing, and really kind of screwed up life for them in terms of scaring the game away or whatever. And Chief Washakie of the Shoshones was always a friend, quote, a friend of the white man. And so he actually helped travelers in their covered wagons as they went through along this highway, and never was there heard like a murmur from him as the chief of that particular tribe that this was a problem. And so it's fascinating guy. I've since picked up a biography of his that I don't have the name of in front of me, but written by a professor from the University of Wyoming. She wrote this wonderful biography of Washakie, and I'm in the process of reading through that. So you go through the Wind River Reservation. I drove past the spot where Hank and Ben and I had stopped 20 years earlier when they were kids, when we were driving up to Yellowstone to pick up Christy and a very young Cameron James at the airport. And so we drove by that spot. That was kind of neat. And you drive up and over Togwitee Pass, actually. You go past through Du Bois, up and over this pass, Togwitee Pass, and then you go down into, drops you literally in Grand Teton National Park as you come down the hill. Absolutely beautiful view of the Tetons. I just can't tell you how beautiful this drive was all day long. From there, from Grand Teton National Park, drove through the park, drove down to Jackson. From Jackson, I took the highway. I believe it's 22. Could be 32, but I believe it's 22, up and over the pass to Victor, Idaho, which you see here as an icon. Hopefully, again, you can see my pointer. If not, you'll see the icon just over the border into Idaho, of the little town there. And from there, I drove up to the nature preserve I was telling you about, met Eric, and Eric and I, like I said, went up over the pass from Idaho back into Montana, or into Montana for the first time for me on this trip. And we stayed at Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge or Preserve. I don't remember which it is. So I'm going to probably call it the refuge from now on. So this is days 4 and 5. I spent 2 full days there at the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge with Eric. I'll talk about fishing. The fishing I did on this trip, it actually ended up being rather limited on this trip for reasons I'll tell you about in a little bit. But spent 2 full days there, and this was like, I don't even know. I've never been to Alaska, but this was so Alaska-like, so remote. Very, very, very few people there. There were some fishermen who knew about it, but absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. It is bear country. We did carry bear spray with us really on the whole trip that Eric and I were together because we were always in bear country when we weren't driving the highways. Definitely we were camping, but it was beautiful. And you can see a picture there in the upper right-hand corner of Eric and I, our automobiles and our camp setup with our tarp, etc. I love that tarp. Snow Peak is the brand. Got the tarp, got the bamboo table, I've got the sort of red director chairs that we sat around in. And also this year did a mosquito netting thing where I bought a mosquito netting online and in my front yard here in Dallas, set it up to where I could pretty easily get the whole thing set up, and we had mosquito netting. I also had a electronic device that I use for bugs, for mosquitoes. Ended up being a bad idea because it actually ended up making me sick. So sick, in fact, that at one point I had to go crawling into the emergency room in Phillipsburg, Montana, with a massive sinus infection, something I hadn't had for years. So I know it was directly caused by me using that particular device. I think because it was in such close quarters and underneath the tarp, I think I was just breathing it in like, air, and it really upset my sinuses. So I'm probably not going to use that in the future and just stick with the mosquito netting and then just, any mosquito repellent, because there were mosquitoes throughout the trip, but they weren't too bad, here in particular. Highly, highly recommend. I'll talk about the fishing there in a little bit. Day 6, I drove from Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge to Dillon, Montana. Left Eric behind for one evening. He stayed behind and camped. I drove ahead and got a hotel room in Dillon because wasn't feeling well for the reasons I mentioned before. So that drive's a beautiful drive. The first leg of that takes you from Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge over a gravel road to the interstate, which is I-15. Got on the interstate really quickly, got up to Dillon, Montana, got a hotel room. But on the drive, Red Rock Creek, which is what forms the Red Rock Lakes and ultimately dumps into the Clark Canyon Reservoir. It enters as Red Rock Creek and exits Clark Canyon Reservoir as the Beaverhead River, so the world famous fly fishing river. Same river, just different names. And once you get past Clark Canyon, it becomes the Beaverhead. There's a picture right there of, by the way, of the Hotel Metlin in Dillon. Kind of gives you an idea what Dillon's like. Just a funky, cool old railroad hotel. That is still in operation, even though, obviously people aren't using the railroad like they used to. Day 7. So day 7, met Eric in the parking lot of the Safeway in Dillon, Montana. I thought they were going to kick me out of there. I was probably there for 3 hours total, either shopping again because Eric told me something that I'd forgotten to get ice or something. And then going back in a third time for Eric to pick up his prescription there. We drove from Dillon to Upper Rock Creek, which is a Blue Ribbon. Rock Creek is just a fantastic trout stream in Montana. This is what our route looked like. At the bottom of the map there, you've got Dillon, Montana. You get back on Highway 15 and you drive up to I-80, which is just to the west of Butte. Drive through the old, really cool old historic mining town of Anaconda. And from there you leave, just before Anaconda, you leave the interstate behind and drive by Phillipsburg, Montana. You might see a lake there in the map, and that lake is Georgetown Lake. Didn't stop and fish it or whatever, but it's just absolutely gorgeous. Another incredible drive. And from there, we went back to our standard campground we stayed at last year, where we met actually for the first time, Eric and I, at the Rocky Creek campground. So the whole trip probably took 2 hours and 15 minutes, something like that. Days 8 through 12, Eric and I camped out together on Upper Rock Creek in Montana. So I'm not not going to show you a ton of pictures from that, but it it was again just absolutely beautiful. This is one of my favorite places in the world. I really would have a hard time getting tired of this place. Fishing's unbelievable. The scenery's amazing. The campground is just your standard, National Forest Service campground, pit toilets and no showers, but really, really fun. In the picture there on the left-hand side, I got a wind knot that it's funny. I took a picture of it. It meant enough to me that I took a picture, but that's me about half an hour into trying to untie this unbelievable wind knot in my tarp. That was exciting. Not at all. Actually, it wasn't fun in any way, but it was incredible to me that the wind could create knots like that. Just unreal. Picture of Rock Creek in the middle, and then on the right-hand side, there's that bamboo table with the chairs I was talking about. I think I was making some breakfast or coffee at that time, but that was a big part of what we did. You see the mosquito netting in the back there, kept the mosquitoes off of us. We were able to, by this point, I'm not using the mosquito repellent thing anymore because I figured out what was going on. And that allowed us to stay out of the sun and have the ability to get away from the mosquitoes. So that was really fun. Day 13, Upper Rock Creek. So we went from Upper Rock Creek to Wisdom, Montana. And so here's what the map looked like going from the top of the map down to the bottom at Wisdom. Went back through to Phillipsburg, and from there retraced our route south, and then east over to Anaconda. From Anaconda, there is a pass. I did this part last year, I think on my own. I don't think Eric was with me at this point, but from Anaconda down to, and I forget the name of the town that's right here, at the top of the Big Hole River. But that drive from Anaconda to the Big Hole River is, oh gosh, it is just absolutely beautiful. I can't tell you how beautiful so many of the drives were on this trip. That was one of them. We got from there, we drove down to Wisdom, Montana, went and walked in to try to find a fly shop. There was one sort of store / coffee shop / quote fly shop. They had some flies, but not a whole lot of information about fly fishing, at least from the person that was working there. But she did tell us that the upper Big Hole had been, the weather had been so hot that fishing really had shut down. Hoot owl restrictions were in place, so we couldn't fish during the day. And I'm not sure we want to fish it anyways. It was low and warm, and we just didn't want to stress the fish and stress ourselves about it. So what we ended up doing was, we need a place to stay. Pulled out the Delorme map that Eric brought with him. I always bring mine, but I forgot it this year, of Montana, and found that 6 or 7 miles to the east of Wisdom was a campground. And the name is escaping me at the moment. Doesn't matter because you don't need to go there. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful, perfect in every way, but nobody, and I mean nobody, was there. We didn't see I saw one car drive through and then they left. There was one tent that looked like it had been set up. I'm guessing that it had been set up by, maybe people who had horses or something, hikers. I don't know. Maybe somebody who was killed in the campground by bears, because bears were a problem. And 3:30 in the morning, we spent one night there at 3:30 in the morning. Eric wakes me up, says, "Hey, Jim, there's a bear very aggressively snorting, huffing, puffing, walking around my tent." And for some reason that seemed to bother him. He says, asked me, do you have bear spray? I said, yes, I do. And so I get up with armed with my bear spray. I don't have a light with me. Eric's shining the light out of his tent. We're trying to make sure that there isn't a bear out there. I didn't actually believe, and Eric, listen, you're not a liar. You're right, but I didn't believe in the fogginess of just waking up that there actually was a bear there. But it certainly made me nervous enough to be really super careful. So I had the bear spray in my hand. We let going back to his car, his Subaru, getting in the car and just kind of leaning the seats back and trying to sleep for a little bit. 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe into that, my car alarm goes off and there's a bear trying to get into my trunk. So, basically the decision was easy. I'm like, fire up the car, let's drive down the road, back towards Wisdom for a mile or two. Let's get out in the open, out in the clear, and just sleep, spend the night in the car, with the seats reclined. That was an exciting experience. We did not want to have a bear encounter. I suspect because it's an elk camp that the bears there are, might be a little bit, not a lot of people. And during certain times of the year, there's carcasses hanging from the trees. You can see in the picture to the right, the cross timber or the little cross limb that they put on there to hang the elk so they can clean it. That was just not a good place to camp, and so don't recommend it. You don't even know the name of it, so don't go to the campground 6 to 7 miles directly to the east of Wisdom, Montana. In retrospect, it was wonderful. I'm glad it happened. It was not fun at the time. Day 14, we went from Wisdom, decided that had heard that the Bitterroot was fishing, and so we drove over to the East Fork of the Bitterroot. And here's our map. So the map goes from the bottom right up to the red endpoint there. It was a campground. I don't remember the name of that one either. Interesting campground. It was as clean a campground as I've ever seen. But I forget, it was so clean. It was kind of like Disneyland a little bit. Everything was paved. The roads were paved. Your parking spot was paved. They actually had a paved path along the river. So it was very clean. It was nice to stay there. Good to stay in a place where you do, we were not in the mood to see bears at this point. But Eric and I went out to fish that early evening, if you will. It was like there and everywhere else. It was hot. The river was too warm. And a hailstorm came through while we were fishing. So it looked biblical almost. There were hailstones, massive hailstones, coming, just absolutely beat the crud out of both of us until we were able to get up under some cover, willows or small trees. It was quite the experience. We had a good laugh out of it. That picture you see there is a picture of the hailstones about 45 minutes or so to an hour after the hailstorm occurred. So those are melted hailstones. The hailstones themselves were larger than that, maybe golf ball size. And like I said, a few of them hit us. It was exciting. Had some welts on my back, but totally worth it. One other thing I'll point out, we went into town up to Connor. You see there in the upper left-hand corner of the map. We drove into town to go to a little brewery. They served tacos that they made there and beer that they made there, and it was wonderful. Probably should be prepared in terms of having the name of the place, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But feel free to ask me. Highly recommend. We sat on the patio outside, had our tacos and some beer, and it's a really pleasant evening. All right, so day 15. Day 15, we drove from the Bitterroot Valley down, or I drove. So at this point, I said goodbye to Eric. He had to get back to home for school. It was the first part of August. He had to be back. He was going to go via Chicago. He went via Chicago, visited a couple of friends, and then went back to Durham. And I went south to Sun Valley, Idaho. And so here's my route from the top of the map to the bottom. You'll see I'm driving up and over Lemmy Pass down into the Salmon River shed. It's really odd as you come down the hill, as you come down the pass, the Salmon River actually flows towards you. And I'm not suggesting it's flowing upstream or uphill. It's not, but it's just such an odd optical illusion. I pulled over the side of the road along the salmon and took this picture. I did not fish. It was warm. I was trying to get to Sun Valley. I had a big drive ahead of me, but I did stop long enough here to pull over, have some lunch, and really enjoy how beautiful it was. But it was hot and dry. A week or two after taking this picture, there actually was a fire, a wildfire, a fairly large one, very close to where I took the picture here. Not shocking to me at all when I heard that news. But it took me about 4.5 hours total on the drive, probably 5 since I pulled over a couple of times. I drove through Stanley, Idaho, one of my favorite places. Oh my gosh, Stanley, Idaho is just jaw-droppingly beautiful. And then from Stanley, drove up over a pass down into Sun Valley, and I stayed at the North Fork campground just like I did the year before. Spent one night there. Loved it. There's a woman who runs it. She and her husband. I haven't seen the husband, but she's probably in her mid to late 60s, something like that. They're from Nevada. Just wonderful people. Had a good conversation with her. Nice to see her for the second year in a row. So so today's 16 through 21, as I mentioned, I spent a week in Sun Valley. I actually worked remotely for work, did my remote work for Microsoft there. And so I actually had a fairly busy week. My boss had a full schedule planned for me. So I told Wilson Yeagley, who I picked up at the airport, that there's a good chance, listen, before he came, there's a good chance I may have to work that week. And I did. Luckily, he had, there's not a picture over here, but his partner in his business has a daughter about my age. She lives there in Sun Valley. She lives in the town of whatever the next town is south of Haley. And she lives there, and she is absolutely an insane fly fisher. I mean, she is really, really into it. So she guided us in effect, for free for the whole week. And, Wilson ended up doing a whole lot of more fishing with her than I did. They even floated the salmon one day, but, fishing was not good, because of the heat. And so the Wood River that goes right through Sun Valley, Ketchum, Haley, was too warm to fish. We tried it for three times, and not a whole lot. I think I may have caught one or two. I'll talk about that actually a couple slides from now in terms of the fishing, but beautiful. Stayed in an Airbnb. Wilson stayed upstairs at the Airbnb in a bedroom. Was not air conditioned. He was uncomfortable and ended up staying at Emily's house for the last 3 days. But I stayed downstairs. Picture in the upper right hand corner is just a brief picture of the table where I worked remotely and the apartment. And there's my fly rod as well. But got to fish Sun Valley. Got to fish the Wood, Silver Creek. Lower left hand corner is the brand new visitor center on Silver Creek. Got a chance to talk to both the one employee, the guy who runs the place, as well as some of his volunteers, a husband and wife team. I spent several hours talking to them one afternoon. So it was fun. And one of the highlights of the trip, I put a slide aside just for this, was the Gannett Country Club and Cafe. It's funny, it's not a country club at all. I loved the name of the place. I love the place itself. It was in effect a steakhouse with a really nice, really nice bar, really nice food. We had stuffed mushrooms. We had some sort of steak, a hanger steak or something that had they did use blue cheese or something, and it was just anyways just amazing. So if you get a chance, you're going to Silver Creek, make sure to look up the Gannett Country Club and Cafe. Highly recommend going in there for dinner. We did it twice. That was fun. So the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to give you a fishing summary for the entire trip. What you see here is, and remember, I'm a big time fly fisherman. Purpose of the trip, a primary purpose of the trip, at least the first 3 weeks before we went to Yellowstone, was to fly fish. And this is it. This is the fly fishing that I did. I wasn't feeling well for a good portion of the trip. Really for the whole 2 weeks, I was with Eric, and then for a couple of days in Sun Valley. Until I got the antibiotics and got the sinus infection taken care of, I just wasn't feeling well. But July 18th at Red Rock Creek I'm now calling it the preserve instead of the reserve. I don't know, whatever the heck it is, refuge. Red Rock Creek in the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Preserve is an absolute gem of a place. And I hope nobody sees this video. I certainly hope it doesn't go viral because hate to ruin the place, but oh my goodness. Like I said, it was like Alaska. It looked like Alaska. It's very remote. We're not competing with a lot of fishermen. When we camped, it was just us in the campground at the Upper Marsh campground. The other campground at the Upper Lake was full of people. It was full in terms of the campground itself being full. There was no one else in this massive National Wildlife Preserve. It was just unreal. Saw trumpeter swans. And then fishing wise, I had a fishing day that will be forever burned into my memory. To give you an idea, when I first one of the places that I love fishing is Firehole Canyon. I've got a website called fireholecanyon.com. Firehole Canyon's in Yellowstone National Park. I had one day there where I was catching massive fish over and over and over again. It seemed like every other cast I was hooking into just massive fish that had run up from Lake Hebgen. This would be in June. I don't remember which year, several years ago, 20 years or so ago. Well, this was just as good. I can't tell you. One of the best fishing days of my life. I hooked into a 17-inch cutthroat that looks like you'd never seen another human being before. I caught 3 sort of regular size, 10 to 12 inch, I guess, cuts. I caught 2 15-inch grayling. Now, those are trophy grayling. Grayling just are not around. They used to be everywhere. They're not. You can find them in abundance in Alaska, probably Yukon. But in terms of the lower 48, there's not a lot of places left that have them. And I caught 2 of them. They were stacked up in the river. In particular places, you just saw them stacked up in there. And the 2 I caught were both 15 inches. And then I had never caught a bull trout either. Really, bull trout are protected. They're relatively rare. I don't know of any place where you can just fish for them. There are places, but I caught a 12-inch bull trout. I thought it was a brook trout at first. It was really cool. So that was a first for me. The 2 grayling were number 2 and number 3 in terms of catching grayling. I'm going back. So don't tell anybody. I didn't fish again until 3 days later in Upper Rock Creek. I didn't fish Upper Rock Creek. I just fished it once. We fished the Fork one evening or one afternoon, but I got 2 fish in the 12-inch range, cut, and a brook trout, which was nice. Went to Flint Creek outside of Phillipsburg that evening. I'm going to be back, going to go there, but I just watched. I literally laid on the bank a good portion of the time, and then I'm just sort of watching Eric fish. So Flint Creek was another place that we went to. I didn't fish it, Eric did. The Ross Fork of Rock Creek, um, we did that 4 days later, sort of as the last day that we were there. Last day, yeah, we were there. Um, it was private water in the sense it was private land, so we parked at near a bridge. We hiked down into the water from the bridge, so that's sort of the law there. I can't walk across the private land. We had a bushwhack. Eventually ended up getting to a bend, probably 100 yards, 150 yards maybe upstream from the bridge. And in this really nice bend, beautiful bend in the river where the river deepened, I got a 14-inch cutthroat. So that was wonderful. Um, and so the fishing sort of continued to decline from there because of the heat, um, and et cetera. But so I mentioned before, we went to the Bitterroot. The water was really too warm to be fishing. So where the hailstorm happened, and I got two smallish cuts that particular evening. And then in Idaho, the week in Sun Valley, I fished the Wood, fished Silver Creek. I got a few fish on the Wood, 2 or 3 maybe for the whole week, something like that. The water again was too warm, the fishing was poor. And that's it. I didn't fish in Yellowstone, but that's it for the whole trip. Boy, that day on Red Rock Creek just made it all worthwhile, as well as the Ross Fork. That was nice as well on Rock Creek. On day 22, I went from Sun Valley to Bozeman. So it starts in the lower left-hand corner, close to where it says Ketchum. Went from Haley, Idaho, through Craters of the Moon National Monument. That place is incredible. Didn't stop, but it looks like fresh lava there. There's literally nothing growing. It's black lava. It looks like it just come from the ground and or the sky. It was beautiful. Made this long drive. Eventually ended up hitting I-15 again. Drove up all the way to Dillon, Montana. So drove on that part of I-15 that I drove a couple of weeks before. Got off at Dillon and drove along I don't know what the highway is, but drove from Dillon through Twin Bridges, Montana, along the Tobacco Root Mountains. It had been raining. It was foggy, misty, beautiful drive. Tobacco Roots are just gorgeous. And I followed a truck for miles. He was, a half mile in front of me. I didn't see a whole lot of 3, 4, 5 cars coming back the other way that entire late afternoon. Once I got up to I-80 to the east of Butte, headed east to Bozeman, it was just a sucky drive. I don't know how else to describe it. It was not good because I was on the interstate, number one. There were trucks everywhere. People seemed to be in a hurry. It was raining. And then once it got dark, I couldn't see anything. So I finally got to our hotel in Bozeman and got my stuff unpacked. An hour and a half later, Hank and his wife, Cameron, arrived from their drive from Portland. I think they went up through Coeur d'Alene, et cetera. So that was a wonderful drive most of the day until I got to the freeway. But then it was great to see Hank and Cameron. So day 23 began in Bozeman. We did, I'll show you in a minute, we did a 5K. We then went to pick everybody up from the airport, Christy, Cameron, and Kate from the airport. Hank and Cameron and I did, and we ended up at an Airbnb in Big Sky. So here's a picture of the Sweet Pea Run and 5K in Bozeman, lower left-hand corner. No, I'm not picking my nose. That's me sitting there with a cup of coffee before the race. Then you see Cameron making hand gestures there in the same coffee shop. And so we ran in this race. I was happy to finish. I think I had 9.5 minute miles or something like that. Certainly felt the elevation a little bit. But Cameron, who came from Portland, won the dang thing. She won the woman's portion of the race. Hank, when we were having coffee, kind of leaned over to her and said, "Hey, I want you to win today." And Cameron's like, "Oh, okay, fine," you know, kind of a thing. She hadn't planned on it. It was supposed to be like a training run almost for her, I think, and she ended up winning the whole thing, the women's portion at right at 6 minutes per mile. So, oh my gosh, going from sea level to winning the race, she is very, very impressive. I mean, she's just an impressive person and beautiful. I don't know how in the world Hank got her, but we're so happy she's part of our family, and she brings so much energy and joy to everything. And she's an okay athlete too. Uh, so here we are at the cabin from that evening. I'll just start in the upper left-hand corner. You see Hank and Christy and Cameron checking something on the phones. I can't remember what they were looking at. Down from that picture, you see a picture of the cabin. There's the porch. Beautiful. Next picture on the bottom, middle-ish, is Hank making dinner. Hank's a wonderful cook. We had some nice wine that evening, and enjoyed our dinner. There's a baby bat that we tried to rescue. He'd fallen out of his nest. So I think that's Cameron trying to feed him a little bit of banana there, even though he's probably an insect eater and doesn't like bananas. We just felt bad for him and made a little bed for him and didn't touch him, so in the hopes that his mother would come get him. Next picture is Christy and Kate arriving, coming out of the airport in Bozeman, and then the goofy picture at the top is Hank and Cameron standing in front of Hank's car. Oh my gosh, what goofballs! So then Yellowstone, days 24 through 27, we spent 5 full days in Yellowstone. It was incredible. I'm not going to give you all the details of the trip, but just a few pictures of Old Faithful. You see a geyser in West Thumb. This next picture is Hank and I having a drink out there on the porch of the Old Faithful Inn. It overlooks Old Faithful. Picture of Old Faithful Inn from the interior. You see in the upper left-hand corner, we were at Mammoth. Spent an evening at Mammoth hotel. Actually, not the hotel itself, but the cabins near the hotel. So a couple of pictures of Mammoth. You see a picture there with me, with Christy and Kate looking at the brink of the Upper Falls, and then there's a picture of the brink of the Upper Falls. Let's see here. So the picture of all of us, Kate took the picture, so she's not in it. But that was us before or immediately after, let's see here, dinner one evening. So that was in Gardner, Montana. We took the brand new paved road because of the floods, the regular road along the Gardner River from Gardner, Montana to Mammoth is washed out. So they created this new road, which we drove over for the first time. And well done, beautiful, easy drive from Mammoth to Gardner. Gosh, it may even be easier now. I think it is, than driving through the canyon. The only picture that I'll point out here is you see a picture of the lake there. That lake is actually Jenny Lake. So we drove down and was able to check off Cameron's list. She's really into national parks. A visit to Grand Teton National Park. There were people everywhere in Yellowstone and in Grand Teton. I mean, everywhere. We didn't encounter many animal jams one evening, but there were a ton of people. So I'm going to skip to day 30. So I'm skipping 3 or 4 days. I'm not going to tell you too much about my drive back to Sun Valley to get my car, which I had to leave behind because I'd lost both car keys. I had to drive back there and get my car, which had since been towed at the tow area. Oh my gosh, what would you call it? The I don't know, it's not the junkyard, but anyways, wherever they keep the towed cars, the pound, I guess, car pound. It had been towed, and I had to go and take care of that mess. So day 30, I'm driving back. I've dropped everybody back off. Hank and Cameron have started their drive back towards Portland, and Christy, Cameron, and Kate had flown back to Dallas by this point. So I drove through Moab, Utah. Like I said, just a magical place. It's hot, summertime, middle of August. Regardless, it was incredible, and as always. And I just want to point out this hotel you see on the left. This is Field Station, Moab. They've taken an old La Quinta and converted it into this just unbelievable climber and mountain biker centric place. They have this outdoor area that you see there. Just inside, you can see the coffee shop. There's like a climbing / mountain biking shop just inside, and each of the rooms are custom made for. I mean, it's really cool. It's all very Instagrammable type of a place. Lower right hand corner, there's a picture of the arches, of one of the arches there that I pulled off of the internet. I didn't take that picture, but lower right hand corner is a picture of the sunset in Moab as I was leaving. So that's it. That's an overview of the trip. It was wonderful. I'm so thankful to have been able to do it. I'm so thankful that Christy allows me to do these things, and enjoyed the time with Eric, enjoyed the time with Wilson, enjoyed the time with the entire family. So that's pretty much it. So thanks for watching.